Hi there, my name is Rick Barker. I am founder of the Music Industry Blueprint, and I help folks navigate the music business. And today on Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, I am going to inform you on some of the secrets to Taylor Swift's success. We're also going to talk about that don't judge. You know, your past does not define your future, and I'm a living example of that. So stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Barron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Barron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Barron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series, where today we're going to take a look at leadership and loyalty lessons from one of the biggest music stars there is. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in, we're about to go full Monty. And of course, if you are a regular listener, we want to thank you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We sincerely appreciate it. And hey, we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes and rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And share the show with everybody you know. All right, so let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, C-suite leader, sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, we all know that the days of being a leader and hiding out in your ivory towered office are over. The outstanding leaders of today understand that a huge part of leadership is in fact influence. And if you can't get your people to follow you and be loyal to you, you're going to struggle to influence them to get them to execute at the highest possible levels. So what does it take to build the kind of loyalty? I mean, like an army of loyal followers who will be there for you through thick and thin. Well, stay tuned because you're about to find out. My guest today is Rick Barker. Now, back in 1989, as you're listening to this, maybe you're a little bit young, but as you're listening back to this, think about where you were in 1989 and think about how you were living. I'm no doubt that your life has changed dramatically since 1989. I know mine has, but not quite as much as my guest. In 1989, Rick Barker was living homeless on the streets of LA, addicted to crack cocaine. 15 years later, though, just 15 years later, I know it's a long chunk of time if you think about 15 years forward. When you look back as in a flash, 15 years later, he launched the career of one of the biggest music stars in the world, Taylor Swift. Rick Barker is now 50 years old, 25 years sober, and the motto that he lives by is, the past does not dictate your future. He strives to teach this to the artists that he works with to look at themselves as the businesses they are, businesses that must lead. With major changes in the music industry through the digital world, artists today have the ability to build an audience and get their music heard like never before. The game of music has changed, but so has the game of business and leadership. And the question is, are you changing fast enough with it? Rick now speaks around the world to a large variety of audiences, sharing with them how to build and engage your audience. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Rick Barker!
Insert hand applause here.
Good to have you, Rick. Thank you for joining us, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. I always love the animation as I've been watching your shows. I just love how excited you get, and it's hard not to follow someone like you. Speaking of leaders, because your energy is infectious, and I think as leaders, that's what we need to have if we want to have people follow us.
I sincerely appreciate that. It's funny. I've been doing this podcast for almost 10 years, and I still really look forward to it. I still really enjoy it. Even though, oh my God, I'm so tired. I had a long, long day yesterday and late night. And then I go, as soon as the show's on, I'm like, yeah, I'm having a good time. And because it's such an honor, and so I'm so grateful to get to have intimate conversations with people like yourself who are doing amazing things in the world, and to have the gift of being able to allow my audience to eavesdrop on these amazing conversations. I just think it's very cool.
Well, I'm excited to be invited, so thank you.
Thanks. So let's just go nitty gritty at a soul level. What makes Rick Barker tick?
You know what? I think for me, it's the fact that a lot of people will question age. They'll say, "Man, I'm about to turn 40, and I was excited when I turned 40, and I was even more excited when I turned 50." And they're like, "Why are you so excited?" I said, "Because no one thought I would live past 25. At the rate that what I was putting myself through an addiction, these are all bonus years for me. This is an opportunity for me to be humble, to be gracious. I teach the artists that I work with, I just say we always need to err on the side of being humble and gracious. And I'm blessed. I mean, I've got an amazing life. I've got an amazing family. I'm a father. I was sharing with someone the other day. I says, I have artists who are in their 30s who in their 20s thought they could conquer everything. And I said, let's go back and think about what our goals were when we were in our 20s. My goals in my 30s look completely different. So now as I get older, I think I just become more responsible because I was wild and free, as a lot of us were. So now I think that, as a leader, as someone who's looked up to, as someone who has the ability to influence, I think it's my responsibility to always try to lead people towards the positive. It's so easy to get involved with the negative. I was sharing with someone earlier today. I said, when tragedy strikes, we have two things that we can either do. We can become part of the situation, or we can become part of the solution. And I always choose to become part of the solution. I think too often I can't change politics. I can't change religious views. I can only change my reaction to these things. And I always try to lead towards what can I do to be a part of the solution and not the problem.
Yeah, and I think that, when it comes to leadership, that's true for us all. I mean, one of the things you said there was you had wild days, but I think that that's the polarity. People take that as meaning, okay, well, you can't be wild, so you've got to be rigid. And I think that that's, again, a misnomer in leadership. You need that wild side. I think that's a great, valuable piece in it, because it means that you will crash the boundaries, you will break the box, you will do things that are a little out of the box. Now, I mean, obviously there was a fork in the road for you where you could have continued to a path of mass self-destruction, but you chose another path. But I still believe that thing that moved you towards crack cocaine and addiction and destructive behavior has the same root that's having you do the things you're doing today and making the difference you make.
Correct. I'm just addicted and focused on other things. You can either be addicted to the problem or addicted to the solution. I'm addicted more to the solution. I think a lot of what I learned on the streets, from playing that game, from going places that I would never wish anyone to go to, have served me well in the capacity that I'm in today. One of my mentors, Scott Borchetta, who runs Big Machine Records, he used to challenge us and he would say, start it crazy and work backwards, because most people won't do crazy. And that's what Taylor and I said. We said, look, if we're willing to go out and do what 98% won't do, we only have to outwork 2%. And I love our odds. When that happens, I'm like, okay, let's go for it. So it served me well. We all have our story. We all have a fork in the road. Some are maybe a little bit more drastic than others. But as leaders, I
really want to come to that in a bit. I want to get people to have a chance to understand that, because I think that part of your story is the fork in the road part is a part that we all need to hear. But you co-authored a book with the strange title of $150,000 Music Career. Tell us a little bit about that.
So a friend of mine, Wade Sutton, I was doing these video blogs every day. I would put my iPhone up in the car and I would drive, and it was called 25 Minutes from Nashville. That's what my commute time was. And I would use that opportunity as a time to talk about maybe a question that had been presented to me through social media, or maybe a topic that was on the top of everyone's minds. And I would always just identify the problem, but then I would always go to the solution. The chapter in the book that I started with was called Quit Bitching and Do Something About It, because everyone was complaining when the solution was right in front of them. And so we put this together, and the title came from a couple different things. One, it was a knock on what the cost of a music business degree was at some pretty influential colleges, was $150,000. But it was also the salary that I made managing Taylor. You know, one of the things that was interesting was that when we decided to work together, her parents were very smart business people, and they said, look, we want to make sure that you and your family are taken care of, because we want you to focus on turning her into something and helping build her towards something, what we called a hard ticket act. And in the music business, there's the fair and festival dollars, which you get paid a big amount of money and people just show up whether they were there to see you or not. Or a hard ticket act is when they actually lay out their money to come see you. And we wanted to turn her into that. And I was blessed to be able to help build one of the most influential celebrities in the world, because we were able to do it the right way. I wish every manager was given that opportunity, but the situation is they said, look, we want you to be able to know your family's taken care of, so you're not making decisions about money.
Right.
You're not making decisions based on money. And I thought that was super smart on their part.
It's very interesting because, you know, we've all seen the quote child stars, whether they're TV or pop or whatever it is, you know, who end up where you were in 1989.
Sure.
You know, they end up strung out and in terrible shape and have blown all their money. And, you know, Gary Coleman ended up working as a security guard, you know, from different strokes. You know, we've seen a lot of that. You know, and I said in the beginning that you launched the career of Taylor, but you talked about the influence and the impact of her parents, and that they were there as guiding as well. And I'm certain that most of our listeners are not looking to become the next Taylor Swift. However, leaders today can no longer hide in the background, and being out in front is not only comes with internal pressure, it comes with external pressure. And you talked about something there that I think is important, which is the responsibility of being a public figure. Talk to us a little bit about that, because, you know, I'm particularly interested in it from you because you were pretty irresponsible, and now
Sure.
you're leading these people, these country music people who are massively influential, and you're talking to them about the responsibility of being a public figure. Talk to us about that.
Well, what's interesting about that is when I started the music industry blueprint and I started working with artists in all genres of music from all over the world, there's a platform that we've been given since the internet came along. And it's a platform that we can either use for good or we can use for evil. I learned a very valuable lesson. My background after I got sober was radio. I did radio for 15 years. And as a morning personality, I had the responsibility of whatever came out of my mouth could influence for either good or either
Absolutely.
bad. It was a
Absolutely.
choice that I had made. And I decided a long time ago that politics and religion were never two things that I would discuss, because you cannot win those conversations. My beliefs are my beliefs. I just encourage people to have beliefs. There was a time back in California years ago, 20 plus years ago, there were a lot of propositions that were being put on the ballot for certain things, and they were hiring these celebrities to endorse these propositions. And they're like, okay, we'll go get Michael Landon because he's Father Knows Best. Everybody loves Michael Landon. He's Pa from Little House on the Prairie, but the proposition might not have been the right proposition for a good majority of people. So I came out. I remember I came out on the air, and somebody had called in and asked me what I thought, and I said, "What I think is that everyone over the 18 has the right to vote." I said, "I personally don't care what anyone else votes for, but I encourage you to educate yourself on what the situation is. Don't complain if you don't vote. Don't go out there and try to sway people." And a lot of people would. I just always chose not to go that route. And when these celebrities have a platform, it's like I mentioned earlier, you can either become the situation or you can become the solution. You can either put gasoline on the fire, which in most cases it's just a bunch of talking heads, or you can immediately go towards the solution. I choose to go towards the solution. And that's what I encourage the artists to do. It's like stand for something and encourage your fans to also stand for something. But I like to for myself, I like to be very careful. I don't want to ever dictate what someone believes. I don't want to dictate their thoughts. I want to encourage them to think. I don't want to tell them what to think. I just want to encourage them to think.
Yeah. Now, obviously, as we said, our viewers, our listeners are not people who are looking to break into the music business. One imagines. I mean, there may be, but at the same time, there is this responsibility of influence.
Correct.
And in saying that, there's a backlash against celebrity endorsement too. We also see
Sure.
that.
Yep.
Who does he think he is? He's been in movies, so he has impact. But the truth of the matter is that they do have impact. And I think that leadership, in many ways, unless it's on a national or international political level, leadership is a microcosm of that macrocosm being celebrity. You are a celebrity
Yes.
within your own environment, and there is a responsibility to that. One of the articles that I wrote, and I did a video on it, which was called "Psychics and Sycophants: Who's Leading the World," and it talked about how leaders often will look at the audience, being the people who they have around them, and say, "Well, you're all, I know that everybody here is thinking this," so they do this psychic thing. And then the people who are under them, being sycophantic, just go along with it because they're afraid to stand up. And it's not unlike when we see a celebrity say, I'm against this or I'm for that. All those fans, naturally, their mind starts to move towards that direction. And it's
Correct.
I like what you're talking about here in that there's the big example of, Beyonce says, or Taylor Swift says, or, a pop star, movie star, whatever it is, says, and then the people start to go, And I think that commitment to be responsible, to think before you speak, which we're not seeing a lot of these days in all leadership roles, where
Correct.
people are just being reactive.
Well, and I
So
also
I like
think
what you're
too,
saying there.
Well, and I also think too is that the people who listen to your podcast and the people that follow you, they all have an audience too. It may not be
Absolutely.
30,000 people in an arena, but they can affect 30 people. They can affect 300 employees. Steve Jobs was a CEO before he was a rock star. It's
Absolutely.
like the
Yep.
same goes for Michael Dell, or the same goes for Steve Wozniak, or, Elon Musk. Before they were who we see them now as, celebrities,
Yeah.
they were just like us.
We're leaders,
They
business
ran a
leaders. Yeah.
business. They had a group of employees that followed their lead. They had a group of people. When Mark Zuckerberg goes on stage, before he was Mark Zuckerberg, he was running a company, and he attracted people to him. And all of you listening to this have a group of people that are attracted to you. You have direct influence. You may not have the quote unquote title of celebrity, but you have the same power as a
Absolutely.
celebrity or someone who's looked up to. And I think with that comes a responsibility and comes a role. And it's up to the individual to define what their responsibility is going to be and what their role is going to be. So that's what I love about this environment of business, because I hate to use the word control, but we control a certain group of people during the day that also go home to their LinkedIn pages and go home to their Facebook pages and go home to their influence. And what we project and what we relate to them can have a direct effect on what they do when they're not in our presence. And I think
Yeah.
that's awesome. I think that's a great opportunity to share messages. It's no different than a parent sitting down with their kids. As I just flew in from Toronto this morning, and I haven't had a chance to talk to my 15-year-old daughter and 13-year-old son to say, how does what you're seeing on the news make you feel? What's the emotions that were talked about at school today? What is it that your peer group is feeling, and what are your responsibilities to that peer group? I never thought that I would be that parent, because I didn't have that kind of parenting. I grew up with divorced parents. My mom was working all the time. But those are the responsibilities I feel I have to directly affect my kids, who then go back into their school and their group of friends and their church group and create their own conversations. Because it's cliche, but that's the future. I always want my kids to think. I never want them to agree with what dad agrees with or to be the political party that I chose to be a part of. I want them to be individuals. And that's what I try to encourage. And that's what I try to nurture. And I think all of us have the ability to do that without being a quote unquote rock star or celebrity.
Absolutely. It's interesting what you talked about because you're now a dad, but I want to go back a little bit
Okay.
because you're a dad, you're a leader, you're an influencer, all those kinds of things. And you just touched on it there. You talked about coming from a divorced family. Well, who didn't? Nowadays. I mean, I remember being at school and my mom and dad were divorced and being sort of looked strangely at because my parents were divorced. It was pretty unusual. I think now if your
Sure.
parents are still together, it's kind of like,
It's unusual,
really?
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know because you're clean, I know what you've done, I know the work that it takes. I've worked a lot with people with addictions and all those kinds of things, and I want to say up front to everybody listening, listen, before you walk down the street and you judge somebody for shooting up in their arm or you see them in the back alley or whatever it is, just remember something. 15 years before launching Taylor Swift, this man was that guy. So you're judging that person, but that person might be somebody you're looking up to in the future. And what's more, I want you to understand this because I have studied the neurobiology of this. Every
Hmm.
human being is an addict. You may be addicted to church. You may be addicted to looking good. You may be addicted to crack cocaine, but you're addicted, folks, and just get that. And some of our addictions are socially acceptable and some of them are frowned upon. Now, here's what's more important than that, because I really don't give a shit whether they're frowned upon or not. What I care about is whether they are destructive or whether they're constructive. And if your addiction is constructive, you still need to look at it because it's an addiction and it may be sucking the life out of another part of your life. But if it's destructive, you might want to definitely pay attention to that. But I don't think that people end up down that road by mistake. Help us understand your moving to that path and
Sure.
how you came out. We'll go into how you came out in a second in a separate part.
Sure. So I went to three different high schools. I had mentioned that my parents were divorced. My mom was divorced 5 times. My dad was divorced 5 times. When I left California when I was 6 years old, I would not see my dad again until I was 17 when I moved from Alabama to my dad. So I went to three different high schools. In the 10th grade, it was the Christians and the jocks that took me in, and I went to church and I played sports. My junior year, it was the Christians and the jocks that took me in, and I did the same thing. And my senior year, when I moved to California, I was brand new to an area. It was the stoners that took me in. And on my 18th birthday,
So
my
I want to
buddies
just
thought
stop
it.
you there for a moment because I
Okay.
want everybody to get that. So I want you to hear what Rick said. That first of all, it was the Christians and the jocks, and he became a Christian jock. Then it was the Christians and the jocks, and he continued to be a Christian and a jock. And then, people go, oh, it's because he moved to California. No, it's because of the tribe. He was then surrounded by a tribe of stoners, and every human being wants to belong. And so he
Correct.
went into that environment. So, when you want to judge a city or you want to judge a state or a certain type of people, consider that. What is the environment? This is an important piece. Before I know, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Rick, but I want everybody to I want to just push them off that judgment piece for a moment and just realize it's the environment. When you look at your kids, look at the environment. Go ahead, Rick.
You're correct, and I think what happened with me was that I was influenced because, and I don't blame anybody for anything. I mean,
No,
it
no.
it started with weed. It was just a little recreational drug, and I didn't really like it. And then on my 18th birthday, my buddies took me to a strip bar, and one of the girls said, "Oh my gosh, I love your voice. Would you announce my set?" And I'm like, "Sure, I can do what that guy did." And I did it, and they offered me a job. And my dad said, "Son, listen, this isn't the environment that you want to be in." And at 18, I said, "Dad, what do you know? I'm going to be paid $500 a week." And this was in 1984. I said, "I'm going to be paid $500 a week to work around naked women. What am I going to do? Go to college and get a job for
Is there a
24
dream
grand a
job?
year?"
Because this
Yeah,
is it.
absolutely. And then I ended up dating one of the dancers, and she broke my heart. And the response was someone offered me cocaine, and I took it, and it didn't work. And they said, "Here, why don't we cook it up?" And I took a hit off what's called a crack pipe. And for the next 3.5 years, I was addicted. I could not stop. Every day was chasing that high. It wasn't that I woke up and said, "Here, let me just put this destructive substance in my body that'll probably kill me. Let me become a liar, a cheat, a thief." a drug addict, a drug dealer. Let me just go do all these things that most people frown upon. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was something that happened. And then, as I mentioned, I became a Christian, when I was 15, 16 years old. By that time, for whatever reason, on April 4th, 1989, I remember the day I saw myself in a mirror. And that was the first, and I'm sure I'd seen a mirror before. I'm sure I had looked at myself, but for whatever reason that day, I looked at myself and I was disgusted. And I looked at myself and I just felt sick inside. And I got on my knees and I prayed. I said, God, let me just die and go to sleep and not wake up. I was too scared to put a gun to my head. I was carrying a gun because I was dealing drugs in LA at the time. That was part of the persona. That was part of what took place. But I was too scared to put a gun to my head. And I fell asleep and I woke up, and I have not had a craving since that day for cocaine. But what I realized, Dov, was that cocaine was but a symptom. The problem was me. The problem was I needed to change some things about myself. So I stayed sober for a year. 6 months after that, my goal was to always be on radio. I had dreamed of being on radio. And six months later, I got an opportunity to intern at a radio station. And later on that year, the Gulf War started. And I was working at the radio station, and they said, go watch the television news, copy down everything that they say, and we're going to have you be the news guy until we can get a news guy in here. So I copied down the news, and I went on the radio, and hi, this is Rick Barker. And I thought I had to be that disc jockey guy, and I absolutely sucked and was terrible. But they loved my enthusiasm, and someone said something to me that changed my life. They said, stop trying to be something you're not. Be yourself. And then all of a sudden, I was just me. 6 months after that, I get my first job. I moved to Santa Barbara. I'm on the radio. I was attending AA meetings at the time. My sponsor says, when you get to Santa Barbara, find an AA meeting and find recovery. Hang out. You just mentioned it earlier. Find the tribe. Find the sober tribe. Continue on this journey that you're on. But I showed up to Santa Barbara, 24 years old, single and on the radio. I said, screw that. I'm a town with 3 colleges on the ocean. Yes. So I found the clubs, and I found another group of people. I remember being at a fight. I was at one of the Mike Tyson fights. I can't remember which one it was. Somebody offered me a beer. I took it. I drank it. They offered me another one. I took it. I drank it. A year sobriety gone at that point. I grabbed the keys. I'm late. I drive to the radio station, and I get pulled over, and I get my first DUI. And then I chalked that up as bad luck, and I continue to hang out with those people. And 14 days later, I get my second DUI. Now, I'm in a small town now. I'm in Santa Barbara. So by this time, I'm already on probation. My license is suspended until this situation happens. And the rules of my probation were you cannot have any measurable amount of alcohol in your system. So I leave this club I'm at. I had a couple beers. I make a left-hand turn, and the cop that gave me my first DUI was in his car and saw me driving, pulled me over, and I got my third. And I went, you know what, God, you're telling me that this is I never thought I had a drinking problem. I used to drink so I could drive. I was so high, I had to neutralize myself. Now I'm just saying, God's telling me, look, if you're going to put mind-altering substances in your body, you, my friend, are a moron and a knucklehead, and you do not make really good decisions. So on March 17th, 1992, that was it for me. But what's even more interesting is that I didn't learn. I never drank again. I never used drugs again. But I was still dishonest. And I thought, well, you know what? Since I'm not drinking, I'm not doing drugs, I can easily drive. And I got 3 driving on a suspended licenses. And finally, I met a judge who didn't think as highly about me as I thought about me. And he said, look, no means no. I don't care if you're on the radio. I don't care if you're a quote unquote celebrity in this town. And he sentenced me to 11 months in jail. And I did 4 months in jail, 3.5 years sober. And that's what I call my second bottom. I had to reach a bottom to stop using drugs and drinking, but I also had to reach another bottom for humility. I was humbled. I was taught you are no better than anyone else. It doesn't matter who you think you are. The rules are the rules. And if you're going to play against the rules, you're going to have a very tough life. And it was that day, I call it the best, worst day of my life, when I was arrested on the radio and put in jail. And 4 months after, when I got out, my life completely changed, and I've never looked back.
It's very interesting what you bring up. I've actually spoken about this before on the show. Um, many of my listeners know that in 1990, I fell off a mountain, got smashed to pieces, and fell equivalent of 12 stories while free climbing and got completely destroyed. Destroyed physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, at every possible level. And people will often say, that was the day that changed your life, right? And I go, no, that is not the day that changed my life. That's the day that should have changed my life, but it wasn't, because life isn't changed in those pivotal moments.
Hmm.
It's changed after, when things seem normal, and then you choose some other direction. And it's that secondary piece that everybody misses. They go, it's this. No, it actually for me was 9 months later when I found my cat dead, a cat I didn't even like. And I suddenly broke down into tears and realized that I needed to grieve my own life and needed to grieve my own ego, and actually had to come back to and decide what my life was really about. But on the surface, everything looked good. Everything looked, quote, normal. So I think I love hearing that when people get, that actually wasn't the point. It should have been
Mm,
that point when I fell on my knees and
sure.
said, take me. But it isn't. It's that moment where you're brought to humility, where my humility was this frickin' cat that I didn't even like is dead in my arms, and I'm pissed at it because it's made a mess in my kitchen, throwing garbage everywhere. And instead of being mad, I'm brought to tears. And it's like,
Mm,
wow. So it's that same thing. Now, I want to tie this to something that's just happened. As we're recording this, I realize that, as you're listening to this or seeing this, it's something we're going to be talking about history. But for us, it's very recent history, as in it was last night. Rick, you're part of the music world, particularly the country music world. And last night, as you and I know, some guy in the Mandalay Bay area at a concert, country music concert, shot and killed 55 people. I believe it was the largest mass killing of by a single individual in history of the U.S. And as injured, I think 400 people. Fired 22,000 bullets, from what I gather. I don't know how you would have that many, but it's for me it's insane. Talk to us, because you would have felt the ripples of that across the music industry. But I
hmm
also want you to talk to us about it in the context of celebrity responsibility as well.
Sure. So, I was at a television filming in Toronto, and so we were kind of blocked off from hearing anything. And I ended up catching an Uber in Toronto to head back to my Airbnb before flying out this morning. And I caught wind of what happened, and it was still early. So I was just kind of monitoring social media because I knew the artist and his band that was on stage. I have friends that are in that band. I have friends that were in the band before him. I know the festival that these people were at. And I wake up this morning and I'm talking to, I was on the train heading to the airport, and I was talking to one of the pilots from Air Canada, and he said, he was flying out of Vegas last night, and they'd shut the airport down because right across from the Mandalay Bay, the highway there is where a lot of the helicopter and private people are going to the airport. People were climbing the fence, running for cover, and they were running onto the tarmac. They were running on to the airport there, and it was just absolutely unbelievable what was happening. And then as I'm reading social media today, um, of course, everyone's going to go through the NRA thing, and they're going to go for mental illness, and they're going to go after a lot of different things. A lot of people are, putting down the artist that was on stage because he was singing, and I know the business. I know he has these things called in-ear monitors, and all you're able to hear, all the instruments and everything. So when you hear the tapes back and you're watching the reports on the news, he's still singing, and in the very faintly in the background, you can hear the pop, 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 and it's going off. And now people are accusing him of being a coward and all these things. And I'm sitting there going, okay, unless you're military trained, you don't really know how to act with that type of rapid gunfire going off. And no one knows the situation that person was in. And you don't yell fire in a crowded theater. And people were, no one knew where the shooter was coming from. So there's a lot of these different things that are being thrown out there. And I'm sitting there going, okay, wait a minute. What do the people in Las Vegas need right now? Get to the Red Cross, donate blood, do things that
Mhm.
can be productive. I was
People have been
telling
lined up
the
out of the
folks.
door for that.
Correct. And I talk to the people that work with me, and I sit down and I say, it's like more people than 55, 58, whatever the number is going to turn out being, died because they have bad water yesterday, died because of drunk driving accidents, died because of drug overdoses. There are so many things. What this does is it brings up a conversation, and we can either use it for positive or we can use it for negative. And I choose to use it for positive. Right now, all these country artists are coming together, and thoughts and prayers for Vegas. To me, that's the proper response right now. In the weeks to come, we'll find more information. In the weeks to come, hopefully this doesn't get swept under, by the next hurricane that comes through or by the next bombing in whatever part of the world that this happens. It seems like everything happens in cycles. And what I try to do for me is I try to say, okay, how am I feeling today? What impact can I have for the positive today? And what can I do in the future to be prepared for something like this? Because you're never truly prepared for it. No. But I chose today, it's like one of the companies that we work with that we help control their social media. They sent a note to us and said, look, today we're going to go silent. And I'm like, big mistake. Because today's the day everyone's talking about it. Today's the day that you can throw positive and inspirational messages out there. Because while you're being quiet, someone else is telling a story that you could be telling yourself. It's the same thing I say to the artist I work with. Have a story, because if you don't, someone's going to give you a story, and it might not be the right one. So don't give anyone the ability to interpret what it is you're thinking or who it is that you are. It's up to you. And we have the tools now, as you and I have discussed, to tell our story however we want to tell it in the narrative that we want to tell it. And I think that's important.
It's the rule of PR, but it's the rule of social media, and it's the rule of influence. And that is simply if you don't take control of your story, somebody else will. But this is part of where we are challenged in leadership today, is the story is often not controlled by the person it needs to be controlled by. It's controlled by something else. I just give you an example. I know you're not political, but I'm going to make a political statement here because I am political.
That's good.
And one of the things that I posted, I said, on Facebook, I said, I have a lot of fans and a lot of foes of 45. So a lot of people I know don't like Donald Trump. A lot of people I know love him, right? But what I said is, tell me something he's masterful at. And that's what I've asked people to do. And because it's this thing around the story. Because one of the things that I see that Donald Trump is a master of is stealing the mic.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I wouldn't disagree with that.
The story's going on about this, and he steals the mic. Like, the story is going on about Russia. He steals the mic, and now it's about taking the knee. Taking the knee is about Black Lives Matter. He steals the Black Lives Matter. He steals the mic and makes it about the flag. The guy is a master at owning, claiming, running the story. And I think that we can all learn from that. Whether you like the man or don't like the man, whether you agree with his politics or his behavior or any of those things, doesn't matter. The masterful pieces take control of the story. And as you were saying, Rick, and I think it's vitally important for us, take the mic, take control of the story, but do it for positive, constructive influence. Right. As a leader, whether you're leading 3 people, 30 people, 3,000 people, 30,000, 30 million, whatever it is, you need to take the mic and take control. And you can't afford to let somebody else take control of your story or of your influence. And as a leader, I think we're often a bit passive of that. And we say, well, that's the marketing department, or that's the PR department, or that's HR. And we don't take the personal responsibility that we need to take.
Correct. And a lot of times it's unfortunate. It seems that the negative people and the most opinionated people, their comment button seems to work better than the positive people's comment button on social media. And there's a lot of people. I was sharing with another client this morning when I reached out to him, and he had sent out a tweet this morning, and he had retweeted a couple other people. And I said, listen, let's take your statement. Let's not retweet anyone else yet, because we don't know what they're going to say, and then we'll be associated with them. And the trolls are going to be looking for reasons to start firing bullets at you. You're in the public eye. You're in the public space. We don't need to give them any ammunition. State what it is that you're feeling and let other people have their own opinions based on that. But let's not get behind anyone unless we're retweeting something that's pray for Vegas or thoughts and prayers. Those are the safe things, but don't get involved in the other things. You may feel that way personally, but there are going to be opportunities where you can state that, but it's still too fresh. It's still too fresh. And this is when the trolls come out, and this is when they start looking to attack. And you cannot give people ammunition to explain to the rest of the world what your thoughts and opinions are if those truly aren't your thoughts and opinions. I think thoughts and opinions and feelings are different sometimes. You had said you had asked people what Donald Trump's skills were. And it's funny because the first word that came to my mind was diversion. And then you went and explained what you were talking about. And I'm like, man, we are, once again, not only did we think the same about the shirts, but subliminally we were thinking almost the same thought to that. Yeah. It's diversion.
Absolutely, it's diversion. And this is the, we've seen this with 3 hurricanes in a row. Mm-hmm. We've got the Russia thing. We've got 3 hurricanes in a row. We've now got Puerto Rico, and guess what? Puerto Rico in the news yesterday, and all the backlash about what Trump said about the mayor of San Juan, that is now gone because we've got the Vegas event. And so this is the thing about the social media world is there's always going to be another event. Now, sometimes there's an individual creating a new event every day who might live in a big White House in Washington. However, there is always going to be another event. And I think that it's really important for us as leaders, in whatever form, to decide when we're going to take the mic and what matters rather than being reactive.
Correct.
To actually, as you say, to choose and say, this is something that really matters to me. And you got to be a bit of a dog with a bone around those kinds of things because there is always going to be another distraction. And please, if you're listening to this, understand that it's in no way am I minimizing what the last horrific event was, whether it was a hurricane or whether it was shooting or whatever it was. But understand that you must control your as a leader, as a CEO, as a CFO, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, you must control your own story. And I think this is vitally important. Tell us what is, thinking about this in this context, what would you say is the biggest lesson that our listeners, our viewers, people in the C-suite environment and entrepreneurs, what's the biggest lesson they can get from the superstardom of somebody like Taylor Swift? Because she's done it differently than others. And it's really interesting because I know, like, I am not a country music fan. I would never pretend to be a country music fan. But I like her pop music. So
do I.
And I kind of like how because I study people and how they work. I love the way she works with her fans, showing up, bringing gifts. I mean, I think there's a lot in there for us to learn as leaders. Tell us about that.
So I wrote an article a couple years ago when her 1989 record came out, and the title of it was Customer Service Lessons We Can Learn from Taylor Swift. And I then also pointed out how well Southwest Airlines and Amazon and Zappos and some of these companies do customer service really well. The thing that Taylor did and continues to do is that she realized early on that not everyone in the world was going to be a fan. Not everyone in the world is going to like your product. Not everyone in the world is going to eat at your restaurant. So what she did is she focused on who her audience was, and she learned as much about them as she possibly could. You mentioned she would show up at people's houses. It wasn't with generic gifts. She had her team, and she went through and read their social media posts and found out what their favorite whatever was, and she showed up with something that was specific towards them. And that's the thing that she's done really well. I always tell people, I say, look, go find a hungry audience and feed it. I don't care if you've got the best hamburger stand in the world. If you open it up in a town of vegetarians, you just screwed yourself. So know who your audience is and continually stay involved in their conversations, and you will always be able to serve them. And that's what she's done better than anyone. When 1989, so some people may not know this, she started off as a country artist, and she was brilliant. She's always had story songs. She still has story songs. The production's just a tad different. So it was her 1989 record. So the three records before that, there were always songs that crossed over into pop, and there were always a couple songs that went to country. And I think the 1989 record is when it was solely a pop record.
Right.
And it set all kinds of records, and she sold like crazy. And now the pop world was waiting for that record. Now this record that's coming out in November, as we're taping this, the world is waiting for this record. She knows who her audience is, and she always makes music for her fans. So companies, make sure that you're always serving your super fan first, and you may get some gradual folks coming in, but always focus on your super fans first.
And I want to address that because I wrote a piece a while ago about Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, and what they, what are they called? Katy Perry's fans. She calls them something.
I know the Gagas are the monsters. That's
Yeah.
all I know is
So
Lady
they
Gaga's.
have their little names, right? And Taylor Swift has those. But one of the things I cited them, and I think I actually cited them in my last book, Fiercely Loyal, because one of the things I talked about was in the book was that very often as leaders we reward the sales team. As an example, we say, okay, you guys did great, so you all get tickets to the X football club, whatever it is. You get to see all the, you get the great seats for the entire season. That's a terrible, terrible reward because I don't like football.
Right.
You've generically tried to win everybody over, and you've actually ended up offending me because what you've actually told me is you don't care who I am, and you never bothered to find out. And what I loved about Katy Perry and Taylor Swift is that you just said it. It wasn't generic. They did the research. They show up with exactly what that person wants. So that person feels so special. Do you think that person is going to go viral with letting everybody know? Of course they are. This, Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, profound lessons for us as leaders in how to pay attention to your superstar, not only fans, but your superstar employees, your
Oh, that's a
superstar
great one.
customers. This is what
That's
you're going to
great.
get. If you reward them generically, I don't care if you give them $5,000. You don't care if you give them $10,000. Yeah, it's nice, but will I remember it? Probably not. We've all, listen, every one of us who has a kid has something that kid gave us when the kid was 5 to 7 years old, and your kid's 30, 40 years old. My daughter right now is 40 years old. I have a T-shirt in a frame that she gave to me in 1989. It's in a frame. Is it because it's a fabulous shirt? No, it's covered in little bubbles. It's awful. But it's that memory. It's that specific, unique piece. And that's what we all tie our hearts to. That's where we get connected. That, for me, is the great leadership and loyalty lesson from people like Taylor Swift that we as leaders really need to grasp.
Completely
Phenomenal.
agree. Completely agree.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, and all you got to do is go on your own social media platforms and see what people are saying about you. If you wrote a book, go to Amazon and read the reviews. It's like people will tell you what they liked and what they didn't like. And you have an opportunity next time around to change some of the things that if a majority of people have said that, then you might want to pay attention to that. And then they become fans because they're like, wow, they cared. They heard me.
So
And that's what
something
people
very
want is they want to be
interesting.
heard.
That's something very interesting for leaders to get is you have to stay authentic and be you. And people think that means rigid. You have to be authentic and you, but you also have to have flexibility in order to listen. So a lot of people will say, well, I've got self-awareness. I know I'm an asshole. That's not self-awareness. That's rigidity. Self-awareness is, I know I'm an asshole, and here's what I'm doing about it.
Right.
Right? So it's that same thing. Like Taylor Swift, as the example, went from country to pop as a complete transfer, but there was a bridge period. And the interesting
Correct.
thing about it is that she's brought country music fans with her, and she's drawn in pop fans. But in essence, when I look at her as an artist, because I'm a music freak, I love music. When I look at her as an artist, for me, it seems like aside from style, and as you said, production, she's pretty much stayed the same.
She has.
She's adjusted the packaging a little.
Yep.
She's and to make it more inviting to those others. And this is the key in leadership. Be real, be authentic, stand by what your values are, stand by what your purpose is, stand by what matters to you. But maybe the delivery is a little bit off, and you just need to work on the delivery. And that can be hard because that can feel like you're bumping against your ego and you feel like a bit rigid about it. But listen, there are a lot of one-hit wonders who disappeared because they
Right.
got rigid about it. And some of those one-hit wonders are in the music business, and some of them are in the business business.
That is a great line. That is a great line. And it's interesting because, as you put yourself out there, there's a reason why there aren't as many superstars as they are. There's a lot of talented people, but there's very few superstars. And if you look at Bruce Springsteen or Jay-Z or Beyonce or Taylor Swift or Bono, is that they've always stayed true to their fan base. They knew who they were, and they were business people. They treated it like a business. And a lot of people were just happy to be there. And I encourage you, just don't be happy to be there. It's like, and that's why I love what Dr. Dre, and I just watched the Defiant Ones with Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre and the transitions and things that they went through. They were businessmen. They were always looking for the next ability to soar. And it's like I tell the artists that I work with, I'm like, look, I said, here's the thing. Timing and luck are not duplicatable. Preparing yourself for the timing and the luck is what's important. Because a lot of times, many of us may get the promotion before we're ready. What you want to do is be ready for when that promotion comes, so then you can take it to the next level and shine and let them know you made the right decision. And a lot of people were launched into stardom before they had that foundation. And it goes back to what you said at the beginning of the podcast. Then they ended up going down these wrong roads because they weren't prepared for that opportunity that TV show created for them. Or you may be going from an employee to a chief operating officer. You may now have the ability to influence a lot of people. And maybe it was one campaign that you worked on that impressed the bosses, but it was just one campaign, and you get this position and you're not prepared for it, and you're right back where you started. So all the things that we can do now to prepare ourselves for those opportunities, that's what I aspire to be. When I got sober and I didn't graduate high school, the first thing I did was get my GED. The next thing I did is I felt I had to play catch up. I wasn't structured to go to a 4-year university because that wasn't how I learned, but I started going to community college, taking marketing classes, psychology, human behavior, everything that I felt I needed to be able to fast track me. I learned early on to buy mentorship. I learned early on to buy private coaching because it could transform me faster. It wasn't that I didn't want to wait and take the time to learn. It's just I felt that I had wasted so much of my opportunity. So I needed to go seek out and start reading books like the ones that you write. I was just finished reading Ryan Blair's Rock Bottom to Rockstar. And one of the things that I learned from reading that book is I think what happens to a lot of us is our failures happen when we are at the top and we get complacent. Very often, bad things are happening when things are bad, but all the business owners that were here and got knocked off got complacent. They got comfortable. They were in that the stocks were doing good. Everything was trading well. Their guard was down. Boom. And then something came in and took them out. And this was a guy who lost billions and has since gained back. But I loved that book because it showed, wow, crap even happens to millionaires.
Absolutely.
Not just junkies, not just drug addicts, not just poor people. Problems happen at the top too. And how was he prepared to take care of that? And that's what I'm always telling my kids. It's like, it's really hard. And as a parent, you can appreciate this. Growing up poor, it's like trying to explain to my son what powdered milk tastes like without having to give him powdered milk because he was complaining that mom forgot to get milk. I was like, you little son of a gun, let me explain something to you. Many kids don't get fresh water, and you're complaining about the milk. We don't want our kids to want for anything, but I also want them goes back to what I said before. Always err on the side of humble and gracious. All of you, whoever's listening to this, has something that somebody else wishes that they had. Even as I'm feeling sorry for myself. Yeah.
Somebody's quote was, "Your shittiest day is somebody else's dream."
Oh, I love that. And I'm going to tweet that later, and I will give you credit for it. So.
Yeah, and it's really worth considering. Before we finish up and we're getting close to the end here, I just want to ask you this because we've been talking about these ups and these downs and all the rest of it. But the journey is never over, not for any
Correct.
of us until it's over,
Right.
and then maybe not. I don't know, but we're always in a process of growth. So I want to ask you, what scares the crap out of you today? What is it that you're working on? What is it that might keep you up at night?
Wondering why I was able to lose the addiction for smoking cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, but I still struggle with my weight. Even though I know when I'm eating it, it's the wrong thing for me. It's like I have started and stopped and started and stopped, and I can't. Maybe it's because food's legal. I don't know what it is, but that's the one thing that scares me, and I'm hoping it scares me to the point when I got on my knees and asked for help, is because I want to be around for my kids as long as we can, and the fear that I die from something I caused scares the crap out of me. That's what scares me.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your strength and vulnerability and sharing that. I think it's vitally important for us all to get. As I said, we're all addicts, and some of those addictions are legal, and some of them are
Right.
applauded, and some of them are not. Every single one of us. I mean, this is where my background is in this whole work. But every single one of us is addicted, and you got to take a look at what that is. Not you, Rick, but all of us. We have to take a look at what that addiction is, because all addiction, if you want to get it in the simplest way of understanding it, all addiction is a way to hide from the pain. So what's the pain? Whether you are smoking cigarettes, you're doing crack cocaine, whether you're eating and you're about to explode, or whether you have to run for 5 kilometers every single day, whatever it is. I'm not here to judge it as right or wrong, because actually I don't see addiction that way. But what I say to you is, if it's interfering with your life, it's because you're avoiding a pain. And the only way to beat it is to turn and face the pain. As one of my favorite teachers, Joseph Campbell, said, the darkest cave, the one you fear to enter, is the one that holds your treasure. That's the place you're not looking when I'm not looking, we're not looking, when we have an addictive behavior and we can see, damn, this is not good, and we still do it. And that's because I don't really want to look at the pain, and that's always a challenge. I really want to thank you for this, Rick. It's been great having you on the show. Thank you so much.
I've loved it. Yeah, I've loved it.
Thanks, my man. I would love for you to let our listeners, our viewers, know where they can find out more about you, about your speaking, about the things that you offer, so they can tap into the resources that you offer.
Yeah, you can just go to my website, rickbarker.com. It's right there. You can grab a free download of the book. You can, get on my list. A lot of what I do, follow me on social media. You can get access there. Most of my social media is positive quotes. I'm the rah-rah guy. I always tell people I'm like sushi. I'm an acquired taste. I'm not for everyone. I'm going to identify the problem, but give you a solution. And that's kind of how I feel. I feel that's my role. That's my role now. It's like, yes, I get invited to speak a lot on the music side of things, but I've been also going into the motivation side of things. I've been doing a lot of 10-minute talks. I love working with kids, especially kids in the areas that grew up poor, because I grew up poor, that may have family members that are dealing with addiction. I always want to tell them my story, to say, look, don't give up on them yet. Don't give up. Here's proof. Don't give up. Understand that they're sick. You wouldn't give up on a person with cancer. Don't give up on a person with an addiction because it's a disease. Love them. They're ultimately going to make their own decisions, but don't give up on them is what I like to tell folks.
Thank you so much, Rick. And again, if you want to find out more about Rick, just go over to rickbarker.com. We will, of course, post that URL on the show notes, but it is www.rickbarker, rickbarker.com. Again, like I said, we'll post it. And I want to thank Rick for joining us today. And I also want to thank you, dear listener, dear viewer, for tuning in. Remember, the research consistently shows that one of the biggest challenges facing the most successful companies is somewhat counterintuitive. That the fastest growing companies hit a point where they realize they're spending an absolute fortune attracting and training and developing top talent, only to have them leave them at an alarming rate. And through today's show, you know some of the reasons why. If you're sick of investing in the training and development of the talent and have them leave you before you get your return on investment, then reach out to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify your hidden loyalty assets within your organization by tapping into your deep purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you cannot outsource authenticity. Thank you for joining us today. Remember to get yourself over to matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, where you can get my Authentic Leadership Matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. It's absolutely free to you. Again, matrix like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, Full Monty Leadership, saying stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can tap a little deeper into the loyalty of your people by actually paying attention to what it is that they really want. Great leadership and loyalty lessons from Taylor Swift. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I'm out.